Before you call it cheating, answer one question. Is a hand around a woman's waist enough to erase 8 years of marriage? It was a reunion, not a hotel room, and Adrian and I were only borrowing a memory from when everyone thought we would end up together. I never wanted to betray my husband. I wanted one photograph showing my classmates what the couple they had imagined might have looked like. Of course, Caleb was there, quiet behind the camera, smoothing the edge of the program the way he did whenever a room made him uncomfortable. By the time the ceremony began, I expected everyone to agree that I had done nothing wrong. My name is Veronica Hayes. I was 38, and I designed exhibits for a city history museum. My job was deciding what people saw and what stayed outside the frame. I called that presentation, not control. The reunion invitation lay open on the hotel desk while I fixed one earring. Thick cream paper. 2 names printed beneath the gold university seal. Veronica Mercer Hayes and Caleb Hayes. My husband ran his thumb along the bottom edge, then squared the envelope with the desk. He asked whether the reunion committee knew who he was. I told him they knew his name. That was enough. He asked if I had ever used the word husband in the planning group, and I said he was turning a celebration into a form that needed every box checked. 1 word. 2 names. No real problem. Caleb had always loved details more easily than he loved a mood. Every Sunday morning, he made coffee and placed our weekly calendar between us. Years ago, I liked watching him block out one evening in blue and label it ours. When my college emergency aid idea grew into the community bridge fund, he built the budgets, tracked the payments, and stayed awake with me before the first donor meeting. That part was real. What also became real was how quickly care could start to feel like management. When I came home excited, he asked what the next step was. When I worried about getting older, he told me our retirement plan was healthy. The week the reunion invitation arrived, I told him I was nervous about seeing people who remembered me at 21. He checked the drive time and booked the hotel. He said the blue dress looked good. Then he asked whether I wanted to leave 10 minutes early because parking near the old library would be difficult. What he meant was that he had listened. What I heard was a schedule. I told him to stop managing the evening before it had started. His hand went back to the invitation. He flattened one corner and said he only wanted to know what role I expected him to play. Of course, I thought the question was dramatic. He was coming with me. He would meet people. He would sit beside me during dinner. What else could a husband need? On the drive to campus, I counted the old buildings as they appeared. The music hall, the stone chapel, the residence tower where Tessa and I had lived. 3 places, and suddenly my face in the car window looked too serious for them. Caleb asked what had changed between us during the last year. Softly, almost like he was asking permission to ask. I told him nothing had changed. I said I had spent months preparing this exhibit of my own life, and I wanted one night without having to explain every label. He looked through the windshield and nodded once. At registration, I slipped the invitation into my bag before anyone could read both names. The old student centre smelled of floor polish and the cinnamon coffee sold near the entrance. Blue banners hung from the balcony. Under them, people who had once slept through morning lectures stood in expensive coats and talked about schools, mortgages, and knees. Tessa Brooks saw me first. She had been my roommate, my loudest defender, and the only person who still sent me photographs from college without asking whether I wanted them. She crossed the hall with both hands raised and announced that the museum woman had finally returned to civilization. Then she looked at Caleb. I introduced him by name. Just Caleb. I said he had survived the drive with me. Tessa waited for the rest. When I did not give it, she smiled and hugged him anyway. She knew he was my husband, of course, but she also knew how a room worked. Correcting me in the first minute would have made the moment heavy. At the registration table, a young alumni coordinator named Mira stood when Caleb approached. She knew him before he gave his name. She thanked him for the planning calls and asked whether the corrected joint founder credit looked right in the ceremony program. Caleb opened the booklet and checked the line. His thumb smoothed the lower corner. I told Mira that my husband could find a missing comma in a fire. She laughed politely. Caleb said the credit was accurate now, then asked whether Dean Porter had received the last impact summary. The question did not fit the version of him I had carried into the building. For 1 second, he sounded less like my guest and more like someone the university expected. I explained it away. Caleb had handled the fund's reports for years. Of course, the coordinator had his number. Tessa pulled me toward the cocktail hall before he could start another discussion about wording. She said I looked exactly like my senior portrait, only expensive now. I told her that was the nicest lie anyone had offered me all month. She wanted to know whether I had warned Caleb about Adrian. I said there was nothing to warn him about. Adrian and I had never slept together. We had never even called ourselves a couple. We had been debate partners, committee co-chairs, and the two people everyone pushed together because our names looked good on the same poster. That was all. Tessa reminded me that half our class had taken bets on when Adrian would propose. I said half our class had also believed the dining hall pizza was food. She laughed. The sound made me 21 for 3 seconds. Inside the cocktail hall, old photographs moved across a large screen. There I was in one of them, standing beside Adrian after we won a regional debate. His arm rested behind me, not touching, while I held our trophy between us. People used to say we looked like a campaign poster for a life that had already gone well. Caleb stopped beside the screen. He asked which one was Adrian. I pointed him out and said the photograph made him look taller than he was. Caleb studied it, then asked whether Adrian knew I was bringing my husband. I told him I had not spoken to Adrian in years. That was true. I did not add that Tessa had shown Adrian my profile picture that morning, or that he had asked whether I still wore blue when I wanted people to remember me. It was the first omission of the night. I did not call it a lie because the missing sentence had not changed anything yet. Then Adrian walked in. He was 40 now, with silver beginning near his temples and the same easy posture that had made professors forgive late papers. A group formed around him before he reached us. When he saw me, his face opened in a way Caleb's had not for years. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. Adrian said I had kept the blue. I told him he had kept the entrance. Tessa clapped once and called us impossible. 2 old jokes. 1 crowded room. No betrayal. Adrian greeted Caleb as if he were another classmate whose name he had forgotten. Caleb offered his hand and said he was there with me. I could have added the missing word. Instead, I asked Adrian about his work. He ran a branding studio and spoke about it without using numbers. Then he asked about my museum work and listened with his whole face. He said I had always known how to make people look where I wanted. Caleb stood beside me, holding my coat. A former classmate named Jonah joined us and asked Adrian and me whether the famous campus wedding had finally happened without invitations. The group laughed. I laughed too. Adrian lifted both hands and said life had made other plans. Jonah looked at Caleb and asked if he was with the venue. There it was. A clean opening. 4 words would have fixed it. He is my husband. Instead, I said Caleb was with me and turned the question into a joke about needing someone responsible in the group. The laughter came quickly. Caleb did not correct me. He placed my coat over the back of a chair, then squared the folded reunion map beside it. I read that as discomfort. Caleb always made straight lines when he wanted to leave a room. So I moved closer to Adrian and asked what had happened after graduation. I wanted the next hour to belong to the version of me these people remembered. The wife could return after dinner. Near the drinks table, Caleb asked why I had let Jonah think he worked there. His voice stayed low, specific. He named the exact moment, the exact question, and the sentence I had chosen instead. I told him nobody thought that. I said Jonah had been drinking, and Caleb was searching for humiliation because Adrian had noticed my dress. What he meant was that I had hidden him. What I heard was jealousy arriving before I had done anything worth resenting. Caleb said the word husband had not left my mouth once. I reminded him that everyone who mattered would learn it eventually. Then I asked why a secure man needed a public label every 5 minutes. That changed his behavior. He stopped standing close enough to join the circle. He took 1 step back and stayed there. Tessa appeared with a tray of tiny desserts and whispered that the old chemistry was still visible. She liked that phrase because it made our lives sound scientific instead of chosen. I told her not to encourage nonsense, then asked whether the reunion photographer was still taking group requests. She said the stone staircase had the best light and offered to gather everyone after the first toast. That became my plan. 1 photograph, 2 minutes. A harmless answer to an old question. Adrian found me again before the toast. He wanted to know whether Caleb was always that quiet. I said my husband believed silence was a personality. Adrian said I deserved someone who could keep up with a room. Caleb came over with the ceremony program in his hand. He said Mira had asked us to stay near the front when the awards began. I asked why he was discussing our evening with a coordinator. He said she needed both of us available. Both of us. Another detail that should have made the night feel shared. I heard it as logistics again. I told him the ceremony was later and asked him to enjoy something without managing it. His thumb pressed the program flat. Then he said he would be where I put him. The sentence sounded like surrender. It made me bolder. The stone staircase curved down from the balcony into the ballroom. Brass lamps warmed the walls, and rain tapped the high windows behind us. Tessa gathered our old debate group on the middle steps, while the official photographer changed a battery below. Jonah wanted the champions in front. Someone else called Adrian and me the marriage that graduation had stolen. The words passed through the group like permission. Caleb stood at the bottom holding my phone. I had asked him to take 1 extra picture because the university photographer would not send the official files for a week. He checked the screen, cleaned the lens with his shirt, and waited. Adrian came to my side. At first, his hand rested lightly behind my back. Then Tessa said we were standing like strangers at a bus stop. People laughed. Adrian looked at me for permission. I gave it by staying still. His palm settled around my waist and pulled me closer. Not hard, not secretly. That mattered to me. If something happens under bright lights while 20 people watch, it does not feel like an affair. It feels like theatre. I placed 1 hand against Adrian's jacket so we would look balanced. The group made the pleased sound people make when an old prediction seems to come true. 1 camera flashed, then another. Across the polished wall behind Caleb, a narrow mirror caught all 3 of us. Adrian beside me, his hand at my waist. Caleb facing us with my phone raised. Our eyes met in the glass. For 1 breath, I almost stepped away. Caleb's face did not look jealous. It looked absent, as if he had already moved several feet farther back than his body. Then Adrian asked whether I was ready, and I told Caleb to take the picture. He did. 1 photograph. 2 seconds. No kiss. The group broke into applause that was mostly a joke. Mostly. Jonah said the picture finally corrected history. Tessa laughed, but not as loudly as she had in the cocktail hall. She looked from my waist to Caleb and began arranging people in a second row without meeting my eyes. Caleb lowered the phone. He did not check whether the photograph was sharp. That was unusual for him. He walked over, handed me the device, and asked Adrian to remove his hand before we moved through the crowd. Adrian removed it at once. Instead of letting that end the moment, I accused Caleb of embarrassing him over a staged photograph. What Caleb meant was simple. The picture was finished. What I heard was that he wanted to control the version of me inside it. I said a secure husband would have laughed. Caleb asked whether a secure wife would have needed the picture in the first place. That landed too close, so I changed the subject. I announced that dinner was starting and told Adrian he could walk in with us. The alumni ballroom held 12 round tables and 1 long table near the stage. Our names stood on thick white cards beneath the university seal. Veronica Hayes, Caleb Hayes, Tessa Brooks. The committee had placed Adrian at another table because he had registered late. He looked at the empty chair beside me and joked that history was separating us again. I picked up Caleb's card. The paper was heavier than it looked. For a second, the printed name sat between my fingers like a question. Then I slid it under the ceremony program and told Adrian to take the chair. Caleb could find another seat until the awards began. Nobody laughed immediately. Jonah studied his water glass. Lila Chen, who had worked with me on the original aid committee, pulled her chair closer to the table but left her hands in her lap. Tessa said there were probably spare places near the back. That was support, though weaker than before. Caleb asked if I was moving him from the seat beside his wife so another man could have it. Again, he used one clean sentence. Again, I heard an accusation larger than the act. I told him Adrian was part of the class and he was my guest. The words came out before I examined them. My guest. Not my husband. Not the man whose surname I wore on the card in front of me. Just the person who had driven me there. Caleb looked at the hidden place card. He pulled it from beneath the program, flattened the bent corner with his thumb, and carried it toward Mira. I assumed he was asking her for a new seat. He spoke to her for less than a minute. Mira accepted the card with both hands and glanced toward our table. Then Caleb sat at an open place near the aisle, 3 tables away. Adrian took the chair beside me. His knee touched the tablecloth when he moved closer, and he made a joke about finally winning something after 15 years. A few people smiled, because not smiling would have admitted the scene was wrong. Dinner began. I kept the conversation moving. That was what I did when an exhibit opening went badly. Direct the eye toward the next object. Adrian told stories about the debate team. I reminded everyone how he once forgot his entire closing argument and used mine. Jonah said we had always finished each other's thoughts. Lila corrected him and said I had usually finished Adrian's work. The table laughed. Adrian accepted the joke because it made him look charming. Caleb, from the aisle, looked down at his program and smoothed its edge. I decided he was sulking. When the first course was cleared, Tessa asked whether Caleb wanted to join us for dessert. I answered before he could. I said he was comfortable where he was and enjoyed watching people more than talking to them. Caleb raised his eyes. He asked whether I was going to tell the table who he was. The room was noisy, but the people closest to us heard. Lila stopped reaching for her glass. I said everyone knew he had come with me. He asked if that was the same thing. Of course it was not the same thing. That was why I refused to answer directly. I told him not to turn my reunion into a ceremony for himself. I said Adrian and I were giving people a little nostalgia, and Caleb could survive not being the center of one evening. Caleb's mouth moved into a small, tired smile. Not warmth. Not surrender either, though that was how I used it. He said he had never asked to be the center. He had asked not to be removed from the frame. He had used my own language against me. I told him the camera was still in my bag if he wanted to be useful during the alumni toast. Lila looked down. Tessa rubbed her thumb over a drop of water on the table until the cloth darkened. Adrian asked whether we should move on from the tension, and I thanked him for being the only adult in the conversation. Caleb stood. He picked up my phone from beside the bread plate and set it in front of me. Then he returned to the aisle table without taking the camera. It was one quiet act. No argument. No scene. I treated it as proof that he had lost. The picture from the staircase had already reached my phone. Tessa had sent it with a row of blue hearts. Adrian and I looked younger in it, or perhaps the lighting was kind. His hand fit naturally at my waist. Behind the phone Caleb had used, the mirror showed a narrow piece of his shoulder. I saved the photograph to a separate album. The next part of my plan was simple. During the Alumni Memories toast, I would show the picture to the room, let them laugh, and then introduce Caleb before the awards. That was my compromise, though I had not told him about it. I would give the past its moment and the present its proper label. I believed I could decide how long each version of my life stayed on display. There was a 40-minute break before the ceremony. The ballroom doors opened into an exhibit corridor where the university had displayed photographs of alumni projects. Rainwater shone on the stone courtyard beyond the windows. People carried coffee in paper cups and spoke more quietly now that dinner had taken some of the performance out of them. I went to the restroom to fix my lipstick. Tessa followed, but she spent most of the time reading messages on her phone. When I asked whether the photograph was too much, She said it was a strong picture. That was not the same as saying it was harmless. I reminded her that she had arranged the pose. She said she had expected me to introduce Caleb before it happened. Then she put her phone into her bag and added that Adrian should not have held me that close. Of course, I heard judgment only after the laughter had stopped being useful. I told her not to rewrite the evening because Lila looked uncomfortable. Tessa said she was not rewriting anything. Her voice had become careful, the way people speak when they want distance without the argument that creates it. 2 compliments earlier, 1 warning now. I still counted her as being on my side. Lila waited outside the restroom. She had been treasurer of our college aid committee and disliked drama because she remembered the work underneath it. She asked whether Caleb was all right. I told her he was embarrassed because he hated groups. She said that was not what she had asked. Then she wanted to know why I had let Jonah believe my husband was venue staff. The word husband sounded sharp in her mouth because I had avoided it all night. I said the confusion lasted a few minutes. Lila answered that it had lasted through cocktails, the photograph, and most of dinner. She had counted 2. That made me defensive. I reminded her that Adrian and I had history. She said Caleb and I had a marriage. No speech followed. She did not call me cruel. She simply said she was going to find him and make sure he had coffee before the ceremony. That was the first person who crossed the room away from me on purpose. I found Caleb in the exhibit corridor, standing beside a tall panel about the Community Bridge Fund. The display showed our early campus table, the first emergency grants, and the fund's current regional work. My old student photograph appeared near the top. Lower down, a caption named Veronica Mercer Hayes and Caleb Hayes as joint founders of the expanded program. Dean Porter stood beside him. Mira held a clipboard nearby. The dean thanked Caleb for clearing up the timeline and said the new wording was more accurate. Caleb told him that the original idea had been mine and should remain mine. He only wanted the work after graduation described correctly. I heard enough to understand that they were discussing us. For a few seconds, the hallway became very simple. Caleb had spent years making my idea function. The program used both names. The place beside me at the table had carried his card. I had moved the card, hidden the relationship, and placed Adrian inside the picture because people liked the old story better. The truth came close without using any dramatic words. Then Dean Porter shook Caleb's hand like a colleague, and something smaller took control of me. I decided Caleb had complained about credit on my reunion night. I decided he had taken my one evening and turned it into another correction. I closed the door with that thought. When the dean left, I asked Caleb whether he had been discussing me behind my back. He looked at the display before answering. His thumb ran once along the edge of his badge. He said the committee had used an old biography that made it sound as if I had built the fund alone after college. He had corrected it months ago, during the planning calls I already knew about. Nothing had been changed that evening. The answer removed the accusation I wanted, so I found another. I said he cared more about a caption than about letting me enjoy myself. Caleb asked whether enjoyment required pretending I had arrived alone. His voice was not angry. That made the sadness in it harder to fight. He said the people in that building knew my favorite professor, my worst haircut, and the man they once expected me to marry. After 2 years of reunion planning, many of them did not know the name of the husband who had shared my life for 11 years. He did not blame them. He blamed the empty space where I had chosen not to speak. For one moment, he looked less like a man with a plan and more like the person who had waited outside my mother's hospital room with cold coffee because I could not bear to sit alone. That memory had no audience, no photograph. Just Caleb and a paper cup he replaced every 2 hours without asking whether I had finished the first. I could have ended the performance there. Instead, I told him he had also created the empty space. I reminded him of every dinner where he answered email while I spoke, every birthday when he bought the correct gift from a list, every fear he solved with a spreadsheet because sitting inside it with me made him uncomfortable. Caleb did not deny it. He said he had spent years doing things for me because doing was easier than being open. He admitted that when I wanted warmth, he often offered a plan. Then he asked whether his failure to reach me had made him someone I was allowed to erase. That question needed an honest answer. I offered a compromise instead. I told him I would introduce him during my remarks. I would explain that Adrian was only a college memory and Caleb was my real life. But I wanted the old group to have its joke first. I asked Caleb to stop making every minute carry the full weight of our marriage. He wanted to know why the past received the photograph while the present had to wait for a correction. I said because the past was the reason everyone was there. His face changed in a small way. He looked down at his badge and squared it against the seam of his jacket. Then he said he would listen to what I chose to tell the room. I accepted that as agreement. Across the corridor, Adrian stood near a display of old debate trophies. He had been watching us without appearing to watch. When I approached, he asked whether Caleb wanted to leave. I said my husband always wanted to leave rooms he could not control. Adrian told me some men confused calm with authority. He knew how to make a sentence feel like permission. Still, his eyes moved toward Caleb before he came any closer. The apology on the staircase had not been fake. Adrian enjoyed the fantasy, but he did not want a fight attached to it. I explained that Caleb had agreed to stay and that I would handle the introduction. Adrian asked what exactly I planned to say. I told him I would say the truth. We had once looked like the obvious couple. Life had taken us elsewhere, and for one photograph we had let everyone see the ending they once predicted. He smiled at that. Then he asked if the photograph would be shown during the toast. He had clients among the alumni and liked rooms that remembered him well. What he offered was visible admiration, which I could call harmless. Mira passed us, carrying a small stack of place cards. Caleb's card sat on top, one corner bent where I had pushed it beneath the program. She paused and asked whether the seating arrangement had been changed by mistake. I said Adrian would remain beside me until the ceremony. Mira looked at the name on the card and said the front seats were assigned to the people named in the award presentation. Again, a clean warning. I told her Caleb preferred the aisle and would come forward when needed. She looked toward him. He gave no signal. Mira placed the card on her clipboard and continued down the hall. Tessa had disappeared from the corridor. I sent her the staircase photograph and asked which caption sounded younger, the couple that should have happened or the ending everyone expected. Her reply came 12 minutes later. She said maybe I should not post it until morning. That was all. I chose the second caption anyway. It sounded less romantic to me, more historical. At a museum, a label can change the meaning of an object without changing the object itself. The ceremony bell rang once. People began moving back into the ballroom. I held the photograph open on my phone and rehearsed the order of my remarks. First, the old story. Then the laugh. Then Caleb's proper introduction. I would control the transition so smoothly that even he would have to admit the harm existed only in his interpretation. By then, I needed the room to agree with me more than I needed my husband to believe me. The lights dimmed, but the ceremony did not begin at once. Jonah took the microphone for the Alumni Memories toast and invited people to share one image from college that still felt unfinished. I had my opening. Before Caleb reached the front table, I sent the staircase photograph to the reunion screen. Our younger debate picture appeared first. Then the new one replaced it. Adrian's hand rested around my waist. My face turned toward him. Caleb's reflection was too small for most people to recognize. The room responded exactly as I expected. A few cheers. Warm laughter. Someone called us the alternate ending. I stood and explained that there was no scandal. I said Adrian and I had never been lovers and had no plan to become lovers now. We were only giving our classmates one glimpse of the couple they had spent 4 years expecting. I added that marriage should be strong enough to survive a photograph. My post went live while I spoke. The ending everyone expected. Adrian lifted his glass. Tessa's chair was empty. Caleb stopped at the edge of the table. He asked me to come into the corridor before the awards. I said there was nothing to discuss in private that I had not already explained in public. He kept his voice low. He asked for one final thing. Tell the room that he was my husband. Tell them the fund being honored belonged to both of us. Do it before the dean took the stage. and we could leave together after the ceremony. It was a clean offer. No punishment attached. No demand that I delete the picture. He wanted his real place named. I gave him the one accusation he could not deny. I said he had stopped seeing me years ago. He organized my fears, repaired my problems, and called that intimacy. I said Adrian had looked at me for 10 minutes and remembered the woman Caleb had reduced to a calendar. Caleb accepted it. He said I was right about the way he had withdrawn. Then he asked whether being unseen gave me permission to make him invisible. The people nearest us had gone silent. I could feel their attention changing direction, and I hated that more than the question. So I used the room. I told Caleb that if he could not handle being my +1 for one evening, he could wait in the lobby until the ceremony ended. I said it clearly enough for Jonah, Adrian, Mira, and the 2 tables behind us to hear. Caleb looked at the screen once. Adrian's hand. My smile. His own reflection. Then he squared the edge of his badge against his jacket and said he would let the evening be accurate. He walked toward the back of the ballroom. Not the lobby. Not the door. He chose a place beside the last row where the stage lights did not reach. I read his silence as acceptance. The quieter he became, the more certain I sounded. I told Adrian to stay in Caleb's chair because moving now would make the moment look guilty. Adrian asked whether I was sure Caleb would not make a scene. I said my husband did not know how to make scenes. He only knew how to tidy them after other people were finished. Mira came to collect the tablet controlling the screen. Before she left, she placed Caleb's bent name card beside my program. I moved it under my water glass so it would not distract from the photograph. I messaged Tessa and asked her to come back before my name was called. The message showed as read. No answer followed. One empty chair across the room. One old almost husband beside me. Hundreds of eyes facing the stage. I believed I had arranged the final image perfectly. Dean Porter stepped to the microphone. He began with the Community Bridge Fund. He described a student idea that had helped 19 people during our final year, then an operating system that had kept it alive for 7 more. The first name he read was Caleb Hayes. No one moved at first. The dean asked Caleb to stand. At the back of the ballroom, my husband rose. He smoothed the corner of his program. Then he smiled. It was the same small smile I had read as discomfort in the hotel, surrender at dinner, and weakness beside the exhibit. From the stage, it looked different. Caleb was not waiting for permission to speak. He had stopped arguing with a version of the night that the record was about to correct. The screen behind Dean Porter changed. My old student proposal appeared beside the first budget Caleb had built. Then came the annual reports I had watched him finish at our dining table, the planning call list Mira had mentioned, and the joint founder line from the program. Nothing on the screen was new. I had seen every piece and placed it outside my frame. The dean named me next. He credited me with the original idea. Then he said Caleb had designed the process that allowed the fund to survive, expand, and pay grants after my attention moved to my museum career. He added that Caleb had insisted my original credit remain untouched when the biography was corrected. My fingers closed around the stem of my water glass. I set it down, but my hand stayed there. Faces turned from the stage to Caleb, then from Caleb to me. Jonah looked at the photograph still open on his phone. Lila moved her chair away from the table. Mira lifted Caleb's place card from beneath my glass and set it beside the empty chair. She said the seat had been assigned correctly from the beginning. I tried to explain that the photograph was only nostalgia. I said nobody had kissed, nobody had lied about an affair, and everyone in that room understood the joke. Dean Porter answered without anger. He said memory could not change 7 years of signed reports, and a joke could not change who Caleb was. The explanation did not land. There was no argument for it to push against. Only the correct name on the screen and the wrong man in the chair. Adrian removed his arm from the back of my seat. He told Mira that he had misunderstood because I had never introduced Caleb as my husband. Then he picked up his glass, returned to his assigned table, and left Caleb's chair empty. Caleb came forward to accept the award. He did not expose messages or give a speech about betrayal. He thanked the staff, credited my idea, and said accurate names mattered because work disappeared when the person behind it was treated like help. That was all. 9 days later, a petition for dissolution arrived with a response date printed beneath both of our legal names. Caleb stayed in a rented studio near his office while I remained in the hotel for 3 weeks before returning to our apartment alone. Our joint account became 2 accounts, and my access to the fund's operating budget ended when the board confirmed Caleb as its administrator. Tessa stopped replying. Lila left our alumni group chat, and Jonah removed the alternate ending caption from his post. Adrian sent one message saying he would not be used inside someone else's marriage, then blocked my number. The university kept the ceremony video online, and my museum director removed me from an exhibit about erased local workers after donors began forwarding the clip. Caleb had been right about one thing, and I had been right about another. He did turn love into schedules because feelings made him retreat. I did become lonely beside a man who could organize every part of our life except the part that needed warmth. But I used that loneliness as permission to make him nameless, and I called the applause proof that no betrayal had happened. I wanted one photograph that made me look young enough to choose a different life. What it preserved was the exact second I chose an imagined husband over the real one holding my camera. Caleb's Bent Place card remains in the top drawer of my desk. In the reunion photograph, Adrian's hand is around my waist, and Caleb is already lowering the camera in the mirror behind us.